She twirled barefoot in the dust, her dress catching the last light of day, as if the silence itself needed reminding it was still alive. Then she looked at the sheriff and asked softly, "Are you lonely too?" And something in him stirred that hadn't moved in years. It's a Tuesday evening in the forgotten town of Candlebend, where the sun sets like spilled honey over weathered buildings. The street is nothing but dust and memory, lined with storefronts that haven't seen fresh paint since the railroad bypassed them 3 years ago. That's when she appears. A woman in a faded blue dress steps into the middle of Main Street like she owns the world. Her feet are bare, her dark hair loose and wild, and she begins to dance. Not the proper movements you'd see at a church social, but something raw and beautiful, like she's dancing with ghosts only she can see. Her skirt spins around her legs, kicking up little dust devils that catch the dying light. She throws her head back and laughs at the sky, arms extended like she's embracing the entire universe. It's the most alive thing Candlebend has witnessed in years. Behind lace curtains, the townspeople watch in fascination and horror. Mrs. Hawthorne clutches her pearl necklace. Old Pete mutters about city folk losing their minds. But they all watch. They can't help themselves. Sheriff Calden Strayhorn sees her from his office window, where he's been nursing the same cup of coffee for 2 hours. At first, he thinks his eyes are playing tricks on him. Grief has a way of making you see things that aren't there. But when he blinks, she's still there, spinning in the street like a prayer made flesh. Calden is a man who's forgotten how to be surprised. At 42, he buried a wife and learned to find comfort in routine and silence. His world is measured in predictable problems, cattle disputes, the occasional drunk cowhand, paperwork that never seems to end. But this woman dancing in his street, she doesn't fit any category he knows. He stands slowly and walks to the door. The evening air hits his face, carrying the scent of sage and something else, something like possibility. The woman continues her dance, completely unaware that she's turned the entire town into an audience. As Calden steps off the boardwalk and into the street, his boots loud against the packed earth, she stops, just stops, mid-spin, like a music box that's suddenly wound down. She turns to face him, and he sees eyes the color of storm clouds, bright with tears or joy, he can't tell which. "Sheriff," she says, her voice musical and warm. She doesn't seem embarrassed or ashamed, doesn't offer explanations or apologies for her strange behavior. Instead, she tilts her head and asks the question that will haunt him for weeks to come. "Are you lonely too?" The words hit him like a physical blow, not because they're cruel, but because they're true. Standing there in the middle of the street, with this beautiful, wild woman looking at him like she can see straight through to his soul, Calden realizes he hasn't felt truly seen by another human being in 3 long years. Around them, Candlebend holds its collective breath. Mrs. Hawthorne has abandoned all pretense and is now openly gawking from her front porch. The Miller boys have pressed their faces against their bedroom window. The silence stretches between them like a rope pulled taut, filled with possibilities neither of them expected to find in this dusty, forgotten place where hope comes to die. If that gives you chills, just wait, because what happens next turns this whole town upside down. Make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to get a whole lot more complicated. Sheriff Calden Strayhorn has been many things in his 42 years: a soldier, a husband, a man who once believed in happy endings. But he's never been asked, "Are you lonely too?" by a stranger who dances alone in empty streets. The word yes sits in his throat like a stone he can't swallow. Admitting loneliness feels like admitting failure that 3 years after burying his wife Margaret, he still doesn't know how to live in a world without her laughter filling the corners of their small house. The woman doesn't push. She just waits, patient as rainfall, her bare feet planted in the dust like she's grown there. Up close, Calden can see she's younger than he first thought, maybe 30, with the kind of beauty that comes from weathering storms rather than avoiding them. "Name's Maribel," she says finally. "Maribel Silt. And before you ask, yes, I know how that sounds. My mama had a sense of humor." "Calden Strayhorn," he manages, touching the brim of his hat. "Sheriff here, as you probably guessed." I did guess. A small smile plays at the corners of her mouth. You've got that look like a man who spent his life trying to keep things in order. Must be exhausting. There's no judgment in her voice, just observation, but Calden feels exposed nonetheless. He's built his entire identity around being the steady one, keeping Candleben's small troubles from becoming big ones. Where you from, Miss Silt? Everywhere and nowhere, she says, bending to brush dust from her feet. I don't stay in one place long. Bad for the soul, my daddy used to say. The way she says it suggests there's a story there. Probably not a happy one. Calden's seen enough of life to recognize the careful way people talk about painful history. You planning to stay in Candlebend long? Long enough, she says, then adds, if that's all right with you, Sheriff. I don't cause trouble. I just dance sometimes, when the feeling takes me. Behind them, Calden can hear the soft murmur of voices as townspeople debate this strange development. He knows that by morning, Maribel Silt will be the main topic of conversation at Murphy's General Store. The old boarding house on Main Street has been empty since Mrs. Patterson moved. Calden hears himself saying, keys are with Murphy at the store. Tell him I said it was all right. Maribel's smile is like the sunrise after a long night. Thank you, Sheriff. That's very kind. As she turns to go, Calden calls after her. Miss Silt? She turns back, eyebrows raised. Why were you dancing? For a moment, her carefully composed expression cracks, and he sees something raw and vulnerable underneath. Because if I didn't, she says quietly, I think I might have disappeared entirely. Then she's gone, walking toward Murphy's store with her head held high, leaving Calden standing alone in the middle of the street with more questions than answers and the strangest feeling that his carefully ordered world has just shifted on its axis. For the first time in 3 years, the silence doesn't feel quite so heavy. Candlebend wasn't always a place where joy went to die. There was a time when Saturday nights brought fiddle music from the Silver Dollar Saloon, when children's laughter echoed down Main Street, when the annual Harvest Festival actually meant something. But that was before the railroad chose a route 20 miles south, before the silver mine played out, before half the town's young people packed up and headed to Denver or anywhere that promised a future brighter than slowly fading away. Now Candlebend exists in resigned quiet, like a man who's given up fighting. The remaining residents move through their routines with mechanical precision. They work, eat, sleep, survive, but they don't really live. Which is why Maribel Silt's arrival hits the town like a stone thrown into still water. By Wednesday morning, she's walking barefoot down Main Street, humming strange songs nobody recognizes, but everybody finds themselves remembering. She stops to touch the wilted flowers in Mrs. Henderson's window box, and by evening, those same flowers stand straighter, their colors brighter, as if her attention breathed life back into them. She speaks to people, actually speaks to them, not just polite nods and weather comments. She asks old Henrik about his arthritis and listens when he tells her about the pain keeping him awake. She compliments young Sarah Murphy on her freckles, telling her they look like constellation maps. And for the first time in months, the girl walks with her shoulders back. The children are drawn to her like iron filings to a magnet. She tells them stories, wild tales about dancing bears and singing rivers and princesses who save themselves. Little Emma Collins laughs so hard at one story that she gets the hiccups, and the sound is so wonderful that Mrs. Collins starts crying right there on the street. But not everyone is charmed. She's disrupting the natural order, Mrs. Hawthorne declares over coffee at Murphy's store. Dancing in the street like some kind of heathen. Unnatural, agrees Banker Thornton. A woman her age, unmarried, traveling alone, something's not right about it. But even as they voice suspicions, they can't bring themselves to call for her removal, because despite their fears, they can't deny that Candlebend feels different with her in it, more alive. Sheriff Calden notices the change too. He finds himself walking different routes through town, paths that happen to take him past wherever Maribel might be. He tells himself it's professional vigilance, but if he's honest, it's something else entirely. She's like music in a world that's forgotten how to sing. On Wednesday evening, Calden sees her sweeping the front porch of the old Orpheum Theater. The building has been empty for 5 years, its windows boarded up, its entrance faded and forgotten. Nobody asked you to do that, he says. She doesn't stop sweeping. Nobody asked me not to. Besides, it seemed lonely. It's a building. Buildings can be lonely too. She pauses, leaning on the broom handle. Everything can be lonely, Sheriff, if it's forgotten long enough. Thursday evening finds Sheriff Calden buying 2 cups of coffee from Murphy's store instead of 1. He tells himself it's practical checking on the town's temporary resident. But his hands shake slightly as he balances the tin cups. He finds Maribel sitting on the boarding house steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in rose and gold. She's changed into something simpler, a brown skirt and white blouse that make her look less like a wandering spirit. "Thought you might want some coffee," he says, offering her a cup. "Gets cold after sundown." "Thank you." She accepts the coffee with a smile. "That's thoughtful, Sheriff. Please, sit." He settles beside her, careful to maintain respectable distance. For a moment, they sit in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. "You don't have to keep checking on me," Maribel says quietly. "I'm not going to burn down your town." Calden feels heat rise in his cheeks. "I wasn't—" "It's all right." She turns to look at him. "I understand the need to be careful. You're responsible for these people. That's not a burden you carry lightly." The observation is too accurate. Calden has spent years being the rock everyone else leans on. Nobody has ever acknowledged the weight of that responsibility. "Tell me something," he says, surprising himself. "Why do you dance?" Maribel is quiet for so long he thinks she won't answer. "I had a sister once," she says. "Rose. She was bright as morning, full of music and laughter. We performed together on stages from Kansas City to Sacramento. Small theaters, mining camps, anywhere people wanted to forget their troubles." Calden waits, sensing there's more. "Rose loved to dance," Maribel continues. "Said it was like speaking a language everybody understood. She taught me that dancing wasn't just movement, it was hope made visible." "What happened to her?" "Fire," she says finally. "Theater in Nevada went up like kindling. I got out." "She didn't." She takes a shaky breath. "That was 2 years ago. Haven't been on a stage since. But sometimes, when the loneliness gets too heavy, I have to move. I have to remember what Rose taught me about hope." Calden feels something crack open in his chest. He recognizes that particular kind of grief, the guilt that comes with surviving when someone you love doesn't. "I'm sorry," he says, and means it. "What about you, Sheriff? What made you so good at being lonely?" It's a dangerous question, but something about the way she asked it makes him want to answer. "My wife," he says quietly. "Margaret. She died 3 years ago. Fever took her in less than a week. She was the music in my life. Without her, everything just got quiet. And you've been living in that quiet ever since." "It's easier," Calden admits. "Quieter hurts less than trying to find new music." They sit in silence as darkness settles over Candlebend. When Calden finally stands to leave, Maribel catches his hand. "Thank you for the coffee. And for listening." As he walks home, Calden realizes something has shifted. For the first time in 3 years, the silence doesn't feel quite so heavy. Friday night, Calden is finishing his rounds when he hears something that stops him dead, the sound of a piano, tentative and halting, drifting through the evening air. There hasn't been piano music in Candlebend since the Orpheum Theater closed 5 years ago. Following the sound down Main Street, he realizes it's real. Someone is inside the old theater, coaxing melodies from the ancient upright piano. The front door stands slightly ajar, warm light spilling onto the boardwalk. Calden pushes it open slowly. Inside, the theater is transformed. Someone Maribel has swept away years of dust. The old red velvet seats are arranged in neat rows. Candles flicker from improvised holders, casting dancing shadows and making the space feel magical rather than abandoned. And there, on the small stage, sits Maribel at the piano. She's not really playing. Not exactly. Her fingers move across the keys like she's having a conversation with them, pressing out fragments of melodies that start and stop without warning. Sometimes she hits a wrong note and laughs. Sometimes she plays something beautiful and breaks off abruptly. Calden stands transfixed. This woman, who dances alone in empty streets, sitting at a broken-down piano in an abandoned theater, trying to find music in the ruins of her life. She must sense his presence because she stops playing and turns around. "I'm sorry," she says. "I know I shouldn't be here. I heard the piano calling to me." "Pianos don't call to people," Calden says, but his voice is gentle. "This one does." She turns back to the keys, pressing one with a single finger. The note hangs in the air, pure and clear. It's been silent for so long, it's forgotten how to sing, but it remembers wanting to. She begins to play again, and this time it's different. The melody is sad but beautiful, like rainfall after a long drought. It tells a story without words of loss and longing, of hope struggling to survive. Calden finds himself moving closer, drawn by the music and by the sight of Maribel's face as she plays. Her eyes are closed, tears tracking down her cheeks. "I used to play in grand theaters," she whispers when the song ends. "Real stages, with real audiences. Rose and I had dreams of playing in San Francisco, maybe even Chicago. But after she died, I couldn't. The music felt like betrayal. And now? Now I think maybe the music isn't celebration. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's the only way to keep the people we've lost alive." Calden thinks about Margaret, about the way she used to hum while she cooked. He hasn't allowed himself to remember those sounds in months. "She used to sing," he says suddenly. "My wife, terrible voice, couldn't carry a tune, but she sang anyway. The house has been so quiet since she died." "What was her favorite song?" "Amazing Grace. She said it reminded her that beautiful things could come from broken places." Without a word, Maribel turns back to the piano. Her fingers find the keys, and the familiar melody fills the theater, not the grand church version, but something softer, more intimate. Calden closes his eyes and lets the music wash over him. For the first time in 3 years, remembering Margaret doesn't feel like drowning. Saturday morning brings an unwelcome visitor to Candlebend, a man who steps off the weekly supply wagon with predatory confidence. He's older, well-dressed, with pale blue eyes and a silver-handled cane. Murphy rushes into the sheriff's office, his face creased with worry. "Sheriff, there's a man asking questions about Miss Silt," Murphy says, wringing his hands. "Real particular questions. About where she's staying, whether she's been performing." The way Murphy says performing makes Calden's jaw tighten. "What kind of man?" "City fellow. Says his name is Theodore Blackwood. Claims he's Miss Silt's manager. But Sheriff, the way he talks about her, it don't sit right." Calden finds the stranger at the Silver Dollar Saloon, holding court with several unsavory residents. Blackwood has the smooth manner of a snake oil salesman, all charm and calculated smiles, but cold eyes. "Ah, Sheriff," Blackwood says, rising as Calden enters. "Theodore Blackwood, at your service. I believe you've been harboring one of my performers." "Miss Silt hasn't mentioned being employed by anyone," Calden says carefully. Blackwood's laugh is unpleasant. "Margot has always been independent. Sometimes she forgets her contractual obligations. Her name is Maribel." "Margot Silt is her stage name, Sheriff. The identity she's been running from for 2 years." Blackwood taps his cane. "She owes me money. Considerable money. She also owes me a performance contract that she abandoned." Calden's hand moves toward his gun. "That sounds like a civil matter." "Perhaps. But theft concerns the law, doesn't it?" Before Calden can respond, the saloon doors swing open and Maribel walks in. She stops dead when she sees Blackwood, her face going pale. For a moment, she looks like she might run. Then her spine straightens. "Theodore," she says, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I wondered when you'd find me." "Hello, Margot. You're looking well. Country life agrees with you." Blackwood's smile is all teeth. "Though I'm disappointed, you left without saying goodbye." "I left because our business relationship was concluded." "Our business relationship concludes when I say it does. You signed a contract, my dear." Calden steps between them, his hand resting on his gun. "I think this conversation needs to move outside." Blackwood's eyes narrow. "Sheriff, this is a private matter between myself and my employee." "I understand plenty. Calden's voice drops dangerously. I understand that the lady seems afraid of you. I understand that you're making threats in my town. And I understand that you need to leave, or I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace. Blackwood's mask slips, revealing something cruel underneath. Then the smile returns. Of course, Sheriff. I wouldn't want to cause trouble. He turns to Maribel. We'll finish this conversation later, Margot, when you've had time to remember your obligations. As Blackwood limps toward the door, he pauses beside Calden. A word of advice, Sheriff. That woman destroys everything she touches. Ask yourself why she's running. The annual Founders' Day celebration has been a tradition in Candlebend for 37 years, though in recent times it's become more obligation than celebration. The townspeople gather in the church hall with resigned determination to go through the motions. The decorations are faded bunting dragged out every year. Mrs. Peterson provides apple cider, economizing on cinnamon. The Miller boys tune their fiddles while old Henrik brings his accordion, though arthritis makes his playing more enthusiastic than melodic. Calden stands near the back wall, nursing cider and watching familiar rituals unfold. Families cluster in usual groups, making polite conversation. Then Maribel walks in. She wears a deep green dress that brings out her eyes and makes her skin glow. Her hair is pinned up elegantly. She looks beautiful, but sad. The music starts a waltz Henrik manages without too many wrong notes. Couples move on to the makeshift dance floor, mostly older married pairs dancing with mechanical precision. Maribel stands alone near the refreshment table, watching the dancers. Calden finds himself moving toward her. Miss Silt, he says, offering a formal bow. Would you care to dance? The entire hall holds its breath. Conversations stop. Sheriff Calden Strayhorn hasn't danced since his wife's funeral, and everyone knows it. Maribel looks at him with surprise and something that might be hope. Sheriff, you don't have to. I want to, he says, extending his hand. She takes it, and it's like completing an electrical circuit. Every nerve in Calden's body comes alive, reminding him he's not just a sheriff or widower but a human being capable of connection. They move on to the dance floor. Suddenly, it doesn't matter that Calden hasn't danced in 3 years. What matters is how she feels in his arms. Solid, and real, and alive. They dance through 2 songs, moving together with increasing confidence. Maribel is an excellent partner, following his lead when he knows where he's going, gently steering when he doesn't. You're a better dancer than you think, she tells him. I have a good partner, he replies. When the music stops, they stand facing each other, breathing hard and smiling like conspirators. Around them, the rest of Candlebend begins to relax, remembering that joy isn't betrayal. Later, Calden walks Maribel back to the boarding house. They move slowly, reluctant to end an evening that felt like emerging from a long tunnel. Thank you, she says at her door, for dancing with me, for standing up to Theodore, for making me feel like I belong somewhere. Thank you for reminding me what music sounds like. They stand facing each other in moonlight. Maribel reaches up and kisses him, soft and sweet. For a moment lasting forever, Calden allows himself to feel wanted, alive. When they break apart, her eyes are bright with tears. Goodbye, Calden, she whispers. She disappears into the boarding house, leaving him alone with terrible certainty that something precious is slipping through his fingers. Sunday morning dawns gray and cold, with wind that cuts through a man's coat and settles in his bones. Calden wakes with strange unease, like the feeling before a thunderstorm when all the animals go quiet. He's planning to check on Maribel after church, maybe invite her for coffee, maybe find courage to talk about what that kiss meant. The memory of dancing with her has kept him awake most of the night, not with anxiety, but with hope. But when he reaches the boarding house, Murphy stands on the front porch with a piece of paper and an expression that makes Calden's stomach drop. She's gone, Sheriff, Murphy says without preamble. Left some time before dawn. Mrs. Patterson saw her walking toward the stage stop with a traveling bag, but the morning stage had already come and gone. Calden stares at the boarding house as if he can will Maribel back through sheer desire. The windows that glowed with candlelight hours ago are dark and empty. She left this, Murphy continues, holding out the paper, pinned to the door with your name on it. Calden's hands shake as he takes the letter. The paper is cream-colored, expensive, with elegant handwriting. But there are spots that might be tear stains, and the ink is smeared as if the writer's hand had trembled. He opens it slowly, unable to care that Murphy is watching. "My dear Calden," the letter begins, and the intimacy of his first name hits him like a physical blow. "By the time you read this, I will be on the morning stage to Denver, and from there, somewhere far from Candlebend. Please don't try to follow me. These past weeks in your town, these moments with you, have been the closest thing to happiness I've known since Rose died." Calden's throat tightens as he continues reading. "I told you about Theodore Blackwood, but I didn't tell you everything. I couldn't bear to see the way you looked at me change from respect to pity. The truth is that Rose didn't die in an accident. She died because of me, because of choices I made and secrets I kept." The letter explains what Calden has begun to suspect, that Maribel's past contains shadows darker than bad luck. She writes about years of running, of changing names, of trying to escape a reputation that followed her like smoke. "Theodore will leave Candlebend now that I'm gone. He has no interest in your town, only in making sure I remember that I can never outrun what I've done. But if I stayed, if I let myself have the life I want with you, he would find ways to hurt everyone I care about." The letter concludes with words that break Calden's heart. "Thank you for showing me what kindness looks like without expectation. Thank you for dancing with me, for seeing me as more than my mistakes. Thank you for making me remember that some things are worth protecting, even if it means giving them up. With all my love, Maribel." Calden reads the letter twice, then folds it carefully. For the first time in 3 years, he has a decision to make about love. And what a man does when he finds it, loses it, and has to decide whether to fight for it or let it go. In the days following Maribel's departure, Candlebend settles back into familiar rhythms. But something has changed. It's as if she's left invisible, traces a different quality to the light, a faint echo of music, a sense that joy might be possible. The children show the change first. Little Emma Collins hums the strange songs Maribel taught her, melodies that drift through town like dandelion seeds. Other children pick up the tunes, and soon their playing carries different energy, less restrained, more alive. Mrs. Peterson, who hasn't touched her husband's piano since he died 4 years ago, finds herself dusting the keys one afternoon. She doesn't play not yet, but she opens the lid, letting her fingers rest on ivory, remembering forgotten songs. Even adults begin softening. Conversations last longer. Smiles come easier. The general store becomes less about quick transactions and more about gathering, where people actually talk instead of just exchanging pleasantries. But it's the old Orpheum Theater that becomes the real symbol of Maribel's lingering influence. Someone starts leaving wildflowers on the front steps. Fresh flowers, replaced every few days, as if the building has acquired a secret admirer. Children gather on the steps after school, not doing anything particular, just sitting and talking as if drawn by something they can't name. Sheriff Calden notices these changes, catalogs them with careful attention, but he's fighting his own battle, wrestling with the decision that's kept him awake every night since Maribel left. Her letter sits in his desk drawer, read until memorized. He understands why she left, respects the courage it took to walk away from something good, to protect it. But understanding doesn't make the ache less painful, doesn't fill the silence in his house. On Thursday evening, a week after her departure, Calden finds himself outside the Orpheum Theater. The door remains unlocked, she never secured it properly, and the candles she left sit on improvised holders, unlit but ready. He pushes the door open and steps inside. The theater feels different without her presence, like a church after the congregation has gone home, empty but expectant, waiting for something to bring it back to life. The piano sits silent on stage, lid closed, keys hidden. Calden walks onto the stage, lifts the piano lid, presses a single key. The note emerges clear and sweet, hanging in the air like a prayer. He presses another, then another, not trying to play anything particular, just listening and remembering the night he watched Maribel coax music from this same instrument. She taught me that dancing wasn't just movement, it was hope made visible. The words return as he sits on the piano bench, hands resting on keys. Maribel had said that about Rose, about the philosophy guiding her approach to life. But sitting here, Calden realizes it's true of more than dancing. Music is hope made audible. Love is hope made vulnerable. And maybe fighting for what you love is hope made brave. He begins playing haltingly, imperfectly, but with growing determination. The song is Amazing Grace, the hymn Margaret used to sing, the melody Maribel played when he first remembered his wife without drowning in grief. The music fills the theater, rough but genuine, like prayer from someone willing to try again. And as he plays, Calden makes his decision. He's going to find her. 3 weeks later, Calden stands in the Denver train station with a telegram in his hand and failure heavy on his shoulders. The message is brief. Trail cold. No leads. Suggest you return home. Detective Morrison. He spent every waking hour following leads that went nowhere, chasing shadows that dissolved when he got close. Maribel Silt has vanished completely, leaving no trace of where she might have gone. The detective has been thorough, but the conclusion is inescapable. A woman who spent years learning to disappear doesn't leave breadcrumbs for even determined pursuers. Calden folds the telegram and puts it in his pocket next to Maribel's letter, which he's carried every day. The smart thing would be to buy a ticket back to Candlebend and accept that some stories don't have the endings you want. But as he turns toward the ticket window, a flash of familiar blue catches his eye. Across the crowded platform, barely visible through travelers and vendors, a woman in a faded blue dress walks toward the eastbound train. Her hair is darker, pinned under a plain brown hat, and she moves with careful anonymity. But he knows that walk. He knows the set of those shoulders, the way she carries herself like she's dancing even when just moving through a crowd. Maribel, he calls, his voice lost in station noise. She doesn't hear him. She's almost to the train now, one hand on the rail. In another moment, she'll be gone again. Calden pushes through the crowd. Maribel! This time she hears him. She freezes on the train steps, back turned, and for a moment, stretching into eternity, neither moves. Then, slowly, she turns around. Her face is thinner, marked by weeks of worry, but her eyes are the same storm cloud gray, and when she sees him, her composure crumbles. Calden? She whispers, and his name sounds like coming home. He reaches her as she steps down from the train. They stand face to face while the world rushes around them. What are you doing here? She asks, barely audible above station noise. Looking for you. I told you not to follow me. I know what you told me. Calden takes her hands, and she doesn't pull away. I also know you've been running alone so long you've forgotten what it feels like to have someone stand beside you. Tears spill down her cheeks. You don't understand. Theodore will never stop. He'll use you to hurt me. Then we'll face him together. Calden's voice carries the authority of a man who's made his decision. You said dancing was hope made visible. Maybe it's time to stop dancing alone. Maribel looks like she might argue. Then her face changes, and he sees something new, not just hope, but trust. The willingness to believe she doesn't have to carry burdens alone anymore. The train is leaving, she says softly. Let it. Around them, the platform clears as passengers board. But Calden and Maribel stand still, holding hands like they're the only two people in the world. As they walk away together, she asks, what if we can't defeat him? Calden thinks about Candlebend, about flowers on theater steps, and children humming songs, and the town remembering hope. Then we'll rebuild, he says simply, as many times as it takes. The westbound train pulls in as the sun sets, painting the sky in rose and gold that reminds them of dancing in dusty streets. As they board together, heading home, Maribel leans against his shoulder. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for letting me. Behind them, Denver fades. Ahead, Candlebend waits along with whatever music they'll make together, whatever love they'll build from broken pieces. If you loved this story of second chances and finding love in the most unexpected places, you won't want to miss what happens in our next video. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we've got more incredible tales of the Old West that will leave you on the edge of your seat.